Regrets collect like old friends, here to relive your darkest moments. I can see no way, I can see no way, and all of the ghouls come out to play. And every demon wants his pound of flesh, but I like to keep some things to myself. I like to keep my issues strong. It's always darkest before the dawn. That is Shake It Off by Florence Welch in Florence of the Machine. My name is Jacob Adams. I'm a fitness and leadership coach. I help people just like you get to the next level. Have you ever wondered what it in fact means to, it is always darkest before the dawn? Perhaps you've heard this saying and seen that in life there tends to be a pattern, whether a situation or an event or a story or a drama can last a day, a month, a year, a decade. Sometimes things can get so drastically intense or tough that we can wonder if in fact things will ever get better. There's been so many situations like that in my life. Just last year, for example, my dad was called to the hospital and he went into a diabetic shock because he had taken too much insulin. He took insulin incorrectly and we all rushed to the hospital to see him. Luckily, he survived. The relationship with my father is something that has been on the rocks for many years. As a teenager, we got into, fist fights and things like that, sometimes for seemingly good reasons. But in the end of it all, it was not a positive outcome. That plus other situations led to our family to get a divorce. And for about a decade or so after that divorce, I really wanted almost nothing to do with my dad. And I ignored him for a long time. And that was pretty tough. I just wanted to act normal. I just didn't want to really face that part of my life. I just wanted to, okay, that's done. And put it into a little compartment box, something like a little box like this in the corner of my mind, and never look back. Just leave it in some little box, like some story that I never had to face ever again. And it worked. That actually worked, at least on the surface. We can go around life acting like something didn't happen for many, many years. What's interesting is I can't say with 100% accuracy that the lack of joy in my life led to breakups or fights or arguments with people I cared about. I can't guarantee that. There's no way to pinpoint it like, if you go out in the sun too long, you get a sunburn. That's easy to prove. But to say that the rocky relationship I had with my dad caused other relationships in my life to suffer, the inability to trust my dad led to the inability to trust myself, the inability to trust God, the inability to trust romantic partners, that's harder to prove, right? And yet, that's exactly what I'm starting to see now, all these years later. All of these years later, I'm starting to see that until those very important relationships are healed, we won't be able to grow past the hurt and let the hurt unveil the depth of love, for example. And in that, seeing the darkness, eventually overcoming that darkness, we can eventually see the light. One of my mentors, Garrett J. White, his saying is, you find the light in the night. The light is in the night. He says something like that. And what he's referring to is these concepts, these harder to understand ideas that in our deepest pain, in our deepest pits, in our deepest sins, in our deepest secrets, very deep, deep, deep within the recesses and crevices of our realities, there we will find revelations, insights, and depths and instructions and secrets that can unravel themselves naturally if somebody heard that right now, right? It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe. So the process of, for example, reestablishing the relationship between my father and I has been one that it's taken years even to start rebuilding again. Okay? You know, it started with just, hey, let's come over, let's see each other for Thanksgiving. Let's see each other for Christmas. And just little things like that. And year by year, now come over, and even though my mother and him aren't really speaking, and still, you know, after all these years, it's been like 15 years since the divorce, or more, but let's just say 15 years, they're still not talking. And we invite them over now for Christmas and stuff like this, and they've even shared some words and dialogue with each other. And so there's hope, not necessarily that they'll ever get back together. That's not our intention as the kids, but the hope that there can be some reconciliation between the two parents. Now, this is my story. This is just my story. You might have one similar. You might have one different. Maybe your dad was never there, and that really hurts you, and that's understandable. Maybe your mother was never there, and that's understandable. Okay, my pain is not any better, any worse than your pain. What I'm getting at, the reason I'm making this video, is to share the insight that in going deep and visiting the pain, sitting in the pain with meditation, releasing it, we can start making peace with it, okay? And in that peace, we can see the arriving of a new dawn. Now, this is just one area of my life, one story. Seeing that the light comes after the dark is a pattern that we can see in all areas of our life. Whether it's you're not sure if you're going to get the job, you're not sure if you're going to get the raise, you're not sure if you're going to stay in business, you're not sure if if the person you're with is cheating on you, you're not sure if you're going to stay in the relationship or let them go. There's so many doubts that we sometimes have to face. And I wanted to make this video to say that we often have to walk through the darkness, through the doubts, and count on the fact that it's always darkest before the dawn. Use this metaphor of sorts as a compass to know that as we approach the darkest area of that subject, whether it's financial, business, relationships, whatever it is, our physical health, as we approach the depth of that darkness, with God's grace, we can see the light come after the darkness. Now, again, I've shared with you only just one story. Currently today, 15 years after divorce, and me talking to my dad again, I get to sit down with my dad and have some laughter and see peace in his eyes. And I told him, hey, listen, you should try to talk to mom and my mother and see if you all can reach some sort of friendship or some sort of closure, or some sort of apology to each other for just things not working out the way you intended, you know? And that little bit of suggestion, that little conversation was not even anywhere in the room, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. It was nowhere in the conversation. And through my own struggles, through my own sadnesses, through my own relationships ending, I've been able to see that this is just a man that also had his own relationships end. And as one man to another, I told my dad, listen, you may want to make some peace here, because I don't even think you've done that. And that's important for you and for my mom. And so I'm sharing one story. Again, just one story. There's so many different stories in my life, whether it was moving to a new city to start a business, ending a relationship, what's the best thing for me to do, how do I get over this heartbreak. There's so many situations where, I had to count on the fact that things would get better. I was just going through a dark period, and I was counting on the light to get through it. And that's what I've seen, is that with faith, with strength, with conviction, with searching, with praying, with hope, we can walk and take the next step through the darkest periods. And that's where we can make the breakthrough and see that we actually make it to the next day, to the next situation, to the next moment. And walking with faith like that is challenging. And so this video will be pretty simple in its instruction, but I wanted to share with you my relationship with my father and the family stuff. That's been one of the hardest things and one of the hardest pains and heartbreaks that I've had to feel and process in my entire life. In other words, getting into physical altercations with my father as a young teenager, seeing the divorce happen, having anger towards my dad, and that's been the most intense pains really of my life. And I'll share with you that in not dealing with those pains, I've seen that it's impacted the other aspects of my life. And through seeing it get to the worst and maintaining hope, carrying on, and even facing what I had to face, things are beginning to get better. I pray every day for my dad. I pray every day. I talk to him and text him, send him messages on Facebook, text, like his posts and stuff like that. And so my goal is to rebuild a relationship with my dad. And I see the hope there, and I see that there's a potential there. And the goal is to, with God's grace, see that it comes to fruition. Now, you yourself may have something in your life that you may think is completely done for. Maybe you'll never start your business. Maybe you'll never date that person you like. Maybe you'll never get along with your mom or your dad. What I'm saying is, maybe you need some strategy, some space, some prayer, some belief that things will get better. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not even this year, but with time, I believe that things can get better. And I'm a person sharing you my story that for 10, 15 years, things weren't better. Things were just sort of in a standstill. And that's the biggest change and shift in leadership and consciousness today, is that people have the technology, the counseling, the tools, the resources to start opening up and unwrapping the wounds that are deep within us, these childhood wounds, these old stories, these limiting belief patterns, whether it's in our finances, whether it's in our body, our self-esteem. We're able to crack the code and get down to the nitty-gritty and see what kind of lie we're telling ourselves, what kind of psychological BS we're believing, instead of believing in hope, believing in ourselves, believing in the strategy, taking the next step, walking in faith. We sometimes placate ourselves and just sort of numb ourselves with a little bit of alcohol, a little bit of movies, etc., etc. Before I got on this video, I just wanted to watch Game of Thrones a little bit and just doze off into bed. And the thing is, I promised myself that I would get this video out, and I really believe that it can make an impact to the right person. And making that promise to myself is important. That's why I did it. I think that without making the corrections inwardly and creating these shifts, allowing more light through meditation, through forgiveness, through releasing rage, through self-analyzation, through belief that there is light at the end of the tunnel, there is light after the darkest, there's always light after the dawn, etc., etc. That without believing that, I likely wouldn't be here making this video, because I would think there is no point. Sure, I'm a little fatigued. It's been a somewhat just long day. I've worked out, eaten, it's late at night, and here we are, pushing forward. And with even now, this stage of my life, when I make this video, there's another trial up ahead, and I'm gonna walk through it with faith. So here are some things that to get through the dark. Establish priorities. Establish priorities. Clearly, if you're going through a pretty challenging period, the last thing you need is to waste time and resources and other things that are not going to allow you to focus and dial in on the most important things. One of the most important things is that I work out, is that I go to work, is that I meditate, is that I make these videos, is that I push and I read and I search and I focus and I pray and I take the next step. So establishing my priorities, for example, I have 4 main targets, and I'm measuring those targets, I'm gauging those targets and staying focused. And in that movement towards those targets, that's the best thing I could do to ensure that things go well. Okay, so I'm establishing priorities. Understand that fear is part of life until it is conquered. I've never fully conquered fear 100%. I have conquered it with God's grace, 92%, 95%, 99%, 99.9%. I don't think that I've ever conquered fear 100% of the times. There's been moments where it's gone for long periods and then it kind of can come back. So working with fear is a good step in the right direction, understanding that it's going to be there, and then sort of working through that pressure and working with the pressure is a good skill to possess. Tim Grover talks about it. Michael Jordan's coach, he says, pressure is a privilege. And by having that mentality and that mindset, we can put ourselves in a position to start embracing and feeling that energy. You know, things aren't perfect on my world. I make mistakes. I placate myself. I'll make errors in judgment, and then I'll say, okay, well, you know, where does this leave me now, and what can I do to move forward? And let me do that. And that's really all there is to it. There's really no other way around it. And the quicker we recover from this sort of like downfall or this pit or this regression, the healthier and stronger we're becoming. Okay? In Matthew 14:22, I did look this up as far as the Bible quote, so I hope it is right. Matthew 14:22, Jesus asked his disciple to walk on water. Now, being a believer in Christ, this is the aspect of trusting the Lord and once you've established your priorities and you're taking the steps and you're harnessing and you're praying, at some point you have to relinquish it and trust God and be a child of God and understand that your Father in heaven will take care of you. And that is being a Christian. That's why it's a beautiful thing. So that's the deepest part of it. So walk on water is the most deepest part. I know that I plan to go to a concert in Austin in a week or two, and in just pure faith. It's not because it's the best thing to do. It's not easy to do, but it's something that I'm putting in God's hands. I believe it's my faith asking me or letting me go. Okay? So whatever you do, walk in faith, have your priorities, and receive the blessings of God. And understand the light will come soon enough. And I'd love to hear your comments. This is Jacob Adams. Have a good day. Bye.